Well, I presume then it's time for Jennifer to speak, so it's a real honor. But I want to thank the folks at the Homeless Children's Education Fund, Joe, who does not get enough scrutiny about what a wonderful guy he is. He's always hiding. So Joe Logano, one more round of applause for him. And the staff and all the partners here. It's a great honor to be with you guys. You may know about my work, you may not. I've been working as a doctor making house calls for the last 23 years in abandoned buildings and riverbanks and campsites throughout Pittsburgh, but also increasingly in other cities. And what I think it's meant to me, and I'll be brief, as a medical educator, it's been a chance to connect with folks in a way that we're not able to in a busy emergency room or hospital. And a lot of the structures that we have, I think the cards are stacked against us being human beings with each other. And actually looking really close and honestly at the reality of what people are going through and seeing where they are. I think that gives you so much more respect for the strength of the people that are in trouble, that are hurting. And then I think we also learn a lot about ourselves. So, Sierra's talk today and all the young people in that panel, this is the kind of people I really consider my heroes, people that endure, survive, and even more than that, they find that strength and then they go on and they reclaim their lives. And I think in a sense, their healing is connected with our own healing, because we're not whole unless we're all in this together. And so one of the more profound friendships and examples that I've ever had as a medical educator was this amazing young medical student who came to me. And I asked her, why did she want to work with me? And she said, I've been there, I've been homeless, and I'm now a medical student, and I want to incorporate, the things that you guys are doing and have that experience. And little did I realize how profound that would be for me. So without much further ado, I just want to introduce you to Jennifer Amani. She's an amazing human being, and she's a little nervous, so be nice to her. All right, thanks.
There are a lot of you. Okay, so I wrote this down because otherwise I think I might relieve myself right here. My talk is called Onward and Upward, Thoughts for the Road, kind of like I'm the closer, but also to talk about what I've been through, what I've learned, and maybe what I can offer you and your organization as you go on to serve these kids. So, here we go. Esteemed colleagues and friends, I'm truly honored to be speaking with you today. This is my first time speaking in front of so many people, so I hope you don't mind if I read my notes during this. I hope I will do it with feeling. It'll be just like listening to an episode of This American Life. Trying to do it, that thing with his voice that Ira Glass does, and he talks like this, and then we can have a speech. So I asked the PR people for this how it could be helpful in their efforts to promote this conference, and they said, well, we'd like you to be the face of homelessness. And I said, the face of homelessness? Well, there's no pressure there. And a little bit inaccurate, because we know from everything that we've heard today that homelessness has as many faces as time has time to count, which is to say a lot. So I then spoke to a colleague of mine at the University of Texas, Houston, where I'm finishing my residency. And she said, well, no, you're the face of hope. Hope? Well, that's better. There's no pressure there. And this is the part where the palpitations set in. And this is when the panic arrived. And as I walked around for the next 2 days hyperventilating, I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to speak to 220 people on Friday, and they're going to want to hear a story about success, of courage and victory over circumstances. Young woman conquers homelessness, becomes physician. These are the ideals that America was built on, a true hero story. But I don't have a hero story. No, my true story has a different headline. Young woman fails her way to success, ages during process. Second headline, scientist reverses aging process, cannot reverse failures. You see, I've fallen way more than I've succeeded. I have an MD now, but before that, I'm pretty sure I got a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. But the shattered I'm so sorry, sir. I'm too loud. Just trying to do it with feeling. What an adorable baby you have. But the shattered remains of my efforts later served as stepping stones on my journey. With them, grasping the outstretched hands of good people like yourselves, I was able to climb out of the pit I was in. When people learn this bit about me, they're naturally curious as to how I traveled so far from that point in my life. A lot of the elements that have been discussed here today were in my family too. Family violence, abuse, emotional depravity, neglect. Not many people run from a happy, supportive home. Because many folks like details briefly, here are a few lyrical lines from my life. Our house was cold in mind, body, and spirit. I was a quiet kid, an introvert. My parents had almost no friends. Consequently, I never learned to make any, and I was extremely socially awkward. That kind of social isolation can sow the ground for unsavory folks to take advantage of you later on. Our family didn't look like any other family I knew, on TV or in real life. Communication was minimal. Hugs and kisses, virtually non-existent. I longed for guidance, for belonging, for love. Having no real options, I embraced parental guidance as only Hollywood could offer it. Charles Ingalls, Mrs. Garrett, Bill Cosby, Elise Keaton, these became my role models and my comfort. It was better than nothing. There was a great deal of almost daily violence in our house. I learned to block the screams from my ears, but they seeped into my soul anyway, shorting out my heart to the point that I no longer felt anything. I went to college as an escape, but having no direction, I quickly failed out. I went to work as a disc jockey at the bar scene, the seedy underbelly of the night. I learned lots of things, many of them legal. I met lots of people, many of them gone now. They were no substitute for family. I found a job, but I didn't have first and last month's rent and security deposit for a place. I was working downtown in the Miracle Mile of Chicago, where some of the most expensive shops command the attention of celebrities. But at the end of the day, I went home to my shelter. It's such an empty, aching feeling when you have only yourself to cry with. My mom didn't understand why I didn't just come home. I told her it was because at least I had a job here in Chicago, but the truth was, I'd rather go it alone than face what awaited me at home. This could be an excerpt from my diary. I walked 1,000,000 miles today, and yesterday, and the day before that. I walked the 5 miles to and from work so that I can save the few bus tokens that I have for when I really need them. And it affords me the chance to find spare change on the ground. People in the shelter and my job knows about me. They're polite, but they don't engage beyond their shift. I hope that bully girl doesn't get up in my face again about the bathroom, and I wish that guy would stop pressuring me to do it. My heart hurts, my feet hurt, and so I think I'll just lay down here on this nice patch of grass and rest. That is, until the cops show up and tell me that this is public property, and so I can't be here anymore. Then something happened that turned the tide. A counselor at the Open Door Youth Shelter took an interest in me. She didn't volunteer there with great frequency, but she offered to take me as a client, so I started counseling with her once a week. Soon after, I decided to go to school. I got a new job, and my mom helped me to buy a car, of all people, so that I could get between work and school. Things were looking up. I worked hard and got good grades, But about halfway through my degree, I got fired for a mistake I had made on the job. I was not going to be homeless again. Not when I was this close. Once again, I found myself doing things that I'd rather not, with folks that I'd rather not. But with the help of my counselor, I was still moving forward. I stayed alive. I stayed alive. I did what I had to do to stay alive. And all the while, with just enough strength to put one foot in front of the other, sometimes with long pauses, sometimes with setbacks, but always forward. So here's the next 10 years fast. I aced organic chemistry. I failed anatomy. I got a C in physics. I got a B in physics. I hate physics. I graduated college. My grades weren't stellar, so I did a post-baccalaureate program. I got in interviews to medical school. I got into medical school. I struggled in medical school. But the sun didn't completely go away. And the best part was when I got to do a fellowship in street medicine with Dr. Withers, Pittsburgh's favorite son. And then it was over. I had an MD. I went to residency. I had a baby. I didn't sleep for 4 months. Then I failed a rotation. I was facing probation and dismissal, which would have been professionally devastating. I knew which way this train was headed, and with a heavy heart I left residency with $300,000 in student loans, a family to support, and no validity as a physician. I tried research for a while at the National Cancer Institute in Maryland, but it wasn't really for me. So I went to work. Guess where I went to work? In the seedy underbelly of the medical world. I didn't even know that the medical world had a seedy underbelly, but it did, and I worked there. You see, when you have a checkered record, the good jobs really aren't available to you. The best you can do is earn money where you can, and you use those opportunities to climb when the opportunity presents itself. Eventually, hopefully, you make it back into permissible society. And that I did. After a year of working in less than scrupulous medical jobs, I landed a position with the Indian Health Service, and I worked there for 2 years. Working on the reservation was tough, but it was amazing. The people, like the homeless, are very marginalized, and in that respect, I could identify with them. Many were standoffish and didn't trust white people, and I could relate to that too. Many were wonderful and open and shared their stories and their legends with me. Such richness. And then, when I felt I had done enough work to earn a place back at the table, I applied back to residency. My former program director hated my guts for leaving on my turn. She had written me a final evaluation that would guarantee I wouldn't get a job flipping burgers at McDonald's. But I had been working, made the right impressions and connections, and so I had to try. I applied to 170 programs. I got 8 interviews. I got exactly 1 offer. If anyone's doing the math, this is a less than 5% chance. But in this case, 1 is exactly enough. I'm now finishing residency at the University of Texas, trying to manage my 2 boys, once again, putting 1 foot in front of the other. Now, through all these ups and downs, I think the hardest thing I had to do with respect to my background was to learn how to interact with people in a way that could heal the gaps in my own emotional development. We all have a deep need for affirmation, for belonging, for acceptance into a group. I think back when we were hunter-gatherers, belonging to a group wasn't just a fun way to pass the time, although that was part of it. It was critical to survival. People fared better in groups. We looked out for one another. That's why exile was such a big deal. Sometimes when I was young, in school, we would read the Bible, and in the Old Testament, someone would do something wrong and get exiled from the city, like that was such a big deal. And in my young mind, I would think, so, you got exiled from Babylon. Couldn't you just go to Goshen? You know, hop on your camel, go to Goshen, go to the temple there, start a new life. Well, these cities were not close together. And those camels don't go too fast. And you have to find food for yourself in your camel. There's no grocery store. And by the way, you might get torn apart by wolves while you're sleeping in the middle of the desert. No inns, can't check in the desert inn. So this is why being alone was dangerous. You were much better in a group. And this is why exile was so devastating. We're not hunter-gatherers anymore. but that primal need to belong and be affirmed is still there. And when that need is left unfilled, it leaves gaps in your psyche. And I think that need is so deep that we continue to search for a way to fill it, seemingly to our own detriment. When that need goes wanting, we don't die physically, but we suffer a kind of psychological and spiritual death that can be just as devastating and final. And this might explain why we can pile services in front of the homeless and marginalized everywhere, and they'll still go off in search of the abusive boyfriend, in search of the gang, in search of the next hit, so they don't have to feel the longing of their incompleteness. I can tell you too, I had that longing and ache. I never had those touchy-feeling family connections that I so yearned for, and I didn't know how to make friends. And so, in my case, I depended on the kindness of strangers like yourselves. People would come and go, help for a while and stop. Sue Brown, my counselor in Chicago, was absolutely pivotal. She stuck around the longest, 2 years, and that was when I made my greatest strides. But she couldn't be my parents, and when she left, the bumps returned to my life. I never really filled that gap until I had my 2 sons, and then, when I knew what love truly was, when I knew what it was like to belong to somebody and have them belong to you, my defensive mechanism slipped off my body like outgrown armor, and I was whole. It doesn't have to be sons that heal you. In fact, if you're on the street or in the shelter, I really don't recommend that you try this method because it might bring more problems than healing. But I'd like you to consider this for your programs. How are you addressing this issue? This need for fellowship and belonging? Some kids will be better than I was at that. They'll be naturally extroverted, they'll make friends, they'll do better because they have those skills. I think, speaking for myself, even with all the services and counseling I was offered, that what could have helped me even more was to have one consistent person I could go to and trust, someone older, wiser, and now this is important, not according to banker's hours, meaning you don't stop caring when 5 o'clock rolls around. And now this is America, the land of every man or woman for themselves and pull up yourself by your bootstraps kind of thing. We plug into our TVs and iPads and we go to our own little circuit, go to our job and venture back. Emotional baggage, not my job. I've got way too much going on in my own life to take on someone else's deep-seated struggles. Conventional wisdom says we are not our brother's keeper, which I find ironic because without the fellowship and togetherness that we displayed as hunter-gatherers, nobody would be here today. I like to think that we did not accomplish so much together only to separate now. And maybe we should revisit that thought about being each other's brother's keeper. In many parts of the world, this notion is the way of life. Those villagers may not have everything they want, but they have everything they need. Caring for their younger and infirm members gives them a sense of purpose, and by doing so, they're training the next generation to look after them when they get old or infirm. And we in America drop off our old folks in a home to die alone. So I ask you again, can you, within your organization, address the notion of belonging in a creative way? How about a class called Social Graces to teach kids how to connect if they don't know how to? It could be a joint effort. Perhaps the ones more skilled could help the ones who need a bit more guidance. And this, perhaps, maybe they could be of help to each other and maybe they could belong to each other just a little more. How about a support group? And not just once a week. Do you have problems once a week? I don't have problems once a week. These kids have problems every day. So perhaps run a daily support group. What it would take, 30 minutes, an hour? And let the kids ramble on about what happened to them, their struggles. And name it something cooler than just a support group. Call it something the kids can identify with, like Angry Birds or something like this. How about having a big sister, big brother program with staff members and kids who have been in a compromised situation and live to tell about it? How about a phone number of a cell phone so that caring doesn't stop at 5 o'clock? What can you come up with that would give you, your staff, and the kids a chance to belong to each other? Now, if this notion scares you, I get that. I understand. Sometimes our lives are too overwhelmed to offer that much of ourselves. When 5 o'clock rolls around, we have to punch out and take care of our own mess. I know, everyone's busy. Our world is complicated. So I'd like to offer you a tradition I learned on the reservation. In the Indian culture, there are Indian medicine men and women. They use herbs, smudging techniques, and conduct ceremonies of great importance in order to heal their people. Indian physicians are often selected for their wisdom and patience, and many of the Indians have these qualities, but only a few received the call to the spirit. But your children must reach puberty before you can accept the call to the spirit, because you must care for your own and raise them upright before you care for others. When your children are young, you belong to them. But when they are able to stand on your own, you can accept the call to medicine. When you accept the call, then you belong to the Spirit. The Spirit does not punch out at 5 o'clock. And so I ask of you to look at your own life and determine if you have finished enough of your responsibilities for you to belong to the Spirit. And if not you, perhaps someone in your organization can serve as this person. And if you do find that you can avail yourself as the channel for the Spirit, it might not take as much as you think, perhaps being a big brother or big sister for one kid and being really present for them. In the Talmud, one of the sacred Jewish texts, it is written that he who saves one life saves the world eternal. So perhaps consider taking that to heart and make a difference for one person. Stop trying to be everything to everyone, like Americans often do. Who knows how many lives that person will touch, and then the next person, and then the next. And in this way, we save the world eternal. I thank you for taking your time out of your busy day for hearing me. I don't have a hero story. I have a human story. But it's a story of the Spirit and a story of resilience, and because of this, I'm happy to tell it. If it helps even one person to hang in there, it was worth it to do so. And I hope those of you who didn't need my story as a personal inspiration can find some tool within the talk that you can use in your work. I thank you for being here, and I thank you for caring, and I wish you well. Now, young people, Josh, Tate, Shaquan, Ebony, I'd like to say a few words for you. As I said before, I've lost the game a lot in my life. But if you have come this far, if you're still alive after everything that's happened to you, then you have proven that you can summon the strength to play another day. If you keep playing and learning and growing, you will find your way. My personal goals were a virtual, statistical impossibility. And now I'm standing here speaking with you, thanks in many ways to the people that I met along the way. I was never the winningest person, but in the end, I was just the loser that won. You have that power. Use your resources, identify your trustworthy people, find your footholds. You can do this, one foot in front of the other. It's not what you did, it's what you do now. And so my time is over, and yours has begun. Thank you for having me.